The Keaton kitchen clock clicked like a hard little judge, steady, exact, and impossible to charm. Greg came in late, cologne bright with a sweetness that didn't belong to him. He loosened his tie as if it were part of the act, dropped his jacket on the sofa, and drifted toward the bedroom without washing off the day. Nora moved the way bakers move after midnight, careful, clean, and noticing. She lifted a glass, straightened a cushion, and traced the path his night had left through the room. The house answered with small facts, the ring of moisture on oak, a phone screen awake on the table, a faint perfume that didn't live here. She didn't ask him anything. She didn't need his version to begin. She would take the room's version first. What she was about to uncover wasn't merely infidelity. It ran straight through family. Her breath stayed even. Her hands aligned, recorded, preserved. The clock kept time. Nora let it, and she began with the nearest, quietest evidence tonight, alone. You're watching Crimson Heirs, home for family revenge stories and family drama stories. If this opening pulls you in, subscribe and comment your city to see how far it travels today. Greg insisted for years that email bored him, that calls were simpler, more human. Yet the phone on the table displayed an email badge, bright in the dim. Nora didn't pounce. She tidied the living room as she always did. Jacket to the rack, wallet to the bowl, shoes aligned, a coaster slid under the sweating glass. When she returned, the screen still glowed. She sat on the sofa arm, lifted the device, and let the face unlock present her the truth it had volunteered. The sender line was a scramble of letters and numbers. The subject line showed a single red heart. She didn't blink. She let her eyes move the way they move along a printed order sheet, left to right, then down. Before opening anything, she set Greg's phone back exactly where it had been and photographed the tableau. Glass, coaster, phone, the kitchen clock over his shoulder, all in one frame. Evidence likes context. She took a second frame tighter on the screen, her own phone tilted to avoid reflection. Then she lifted his phone, thumb held steady, shoulders even. Some houses tell secrets by slamming doors. This one preferred screens and paper. In the hallway, Greg's footsteps faded to a bed spring's sigh, and then to snoring. The quiet helped sharpen edges. Nora tapped the notification. 4 words sat in the center of the message, plain as a stamped invoice. "You were incredible tonight, Dad." A red heart followed like punctuation that didn't understand shame. Nora's breath shortened, then leveled. She framed the screen with her phone and took a photo. Then another that included the kitchen clock's face behind the glass, hands marking the hour. She pressed the side button on Greg's device until the light died and the room returned to itself. She turned the paper napkin under the glass to its clean side and wrote the time in pencil with neat block letters. Then she opened her gallery, checked focus, checked glare, checked that the digital timestamp matched the clock above the stove. The message itself offered no name, only the scrambled address she had noticed and a signature of nothing. Sometimes nothing is a shape you can use. Later, maybe tomorrow. She turned to the jacket he had thrown down. The lining held the same sugar-slick perfume. In the inner pocket waited a folded receipt from a steakhouse in San Antonio, dated tonight. 2 entrees. A Cabernet whose label she knew from memory, a bottle he'd bought for their 10th anniversary when the first big hotel order landed. He had told her Dallas at breakfast. Dallas had never smelled like this. Nora placed the receipt flat on the island, smoothed the crease, and photographed the front, the total, and the server's initials. She flipped it over and captured the back, the merchant address, the authorization code, the time down to the minute. Then she set the paper beside the email photos and stood back to frame all of it together with the clock again. Lies pull thread. She recorded where the threads began. She saved the files to a folder named Keaton. The garage breathed cool air when she opened the door. Greg's SUV sat warm from the road, a faint gasoline note beneath the same floral sweetness. Nora opened the driver door, then the glove box on the passenger side, with the unrushed pace she used to test a cooling caramel, slow enough to memorize resistance and return. Loose change, registration, insurance, a travel pack of tissues with a scent that didn't come from any laundry she owned. She didn't touch anything. She photographed it in place, her phone light grazing edges. Under the seat, a wedge of receipt from a gas station outside Seguin marked a time that plugged neatly beside the steakhouse bill. She captured the fragment, then the odometer, then the dash clock, then the parking spot. Back at the glove box, she lifted the registration envelope to reveal nothing else, then returned everything to its place. Seat fabric showed a faint snag on the passenger side, a thread lifted like a question. She pressed it down with one knuckle and let it spring back. Another photo. In the footwell lay a wrapper from mints she didn't buy, a brand the bakery never stocked at the register. Photo. She paused, listening to the garage settle, then closed the door softly so the latch would not announce her work. Back in the kitchen, she washed longer than necessary. Lemon soap rose like a small garden over the sink. She dried her hands and chose a fresh towel. A manila envelope slid from a drawer. She slipped in the printed photos she kept for invoices and used them now for this. Labels could wait. On the ledger line between payroll and flour delivery, she penciled 3 words: email, receipt, glove box. She lifted her shoulders, let them fall, and felt the posture set. At the hall closet, she checked the camera's battery, created a new folder. On a sticky note, she wrote, "Call Marcus. Check camera. Confirm hotel invoice." She slid it under the butter dish where she ever looks. Down the hall, Greg's snore leveled into a metronome. Nora opened contacts, paused over Marcus Doyle's name, and closed the app. Morning would be soon enough. The next image she filed wouldn't name a stranger. It would name who sat across. Morning leaned against the bakery windows when Nora unlocked Sunrise Patisserie. She set her tote on the prep bench, hung her coat, and woke the line by switches. Hoods first, ovens next, then the glow over the case. Mixers clicked, timers blinked, trays stacked like blank pages. She thumbed the laminated checklist, starter refreshed, flour bins topped, parchment cut, and signed the square in the same precise hand she used for payroll. On the corkboard, the week ran from hotel brunches to late-night room service, quantities circled, delivery windows boxed in pencil. She weighed butter, creamed sugar, tasted vanilla, and scraped a bowl clean with the flat of a spatula until the smear vanished. Out front, she propped the door for the cool and chalked the day's pies on the sandwich board. She moved like bakers move after a long marriage with heat, measured, saving steps, letting steel and stone do what they promise. Part 1 had ended with a phone number waiting. Part 2 began with flour dust resting on her sleeve and the day balanced on its first order. Greg appeared around 9, late for his old habits, early for the new ones he was trying on. He passed the register with a half wave, patted empty pockets, and asked if she needed cash. He mentioned a downtown meeting, said partner twice, and attached no firm to the word. Nora nodded toward the deposit bag in plain view and kept the line moving. Her towel caught the sheen from a tray. She set it aside, recorded a delivery number, and let the moment sit. When he left, she checked the wall clock, wrote the time in the margin, and slipped the pencil behind her ear. On the hook by the door, his keyring hung lighter already. In her mind, the Seguin gas slip, the San Antonio bill, and that mint wrapper arranged themselves like arrows on a lane. After the first trays settled into heat, Nora stepped into the office and called Marcus Doyle. She presented the morning the way she balances a till, plain and numbered. 1. An email on Greg's phone saying, "You were incredible tonight, Dad," with a red heart. 2. A San Antonio steakhouse receipt aligned to a gas stop near Seguin. 3. Car details, a mint wrapper, a thread raised on the passenger seat, glove box tissues with a scent she didn't buy. Marcus asked for times to the minute and agreed to follow the highways Greg preferred when he felt unseen. Scope: watch the garage, capture departures and returns, track stops, locate meeting points, and avoid disturbing the pattern. If hotel invoices surfaced, he would secure copies. If faces surfaced, he would record them from public ground. Nora would keep the paper trail straight: prints, digital copies, and a log. "Evidence grows best in sequence," he said. They set a check-in for noon. She ended the call and returned to the bench to divide dough until every piece matched, weight for weight, even. Chain of custody meant making the extraordinary look ordinary. Nora printed the photographs from last night and dawn, trimmed edges square with the cutter's arm, and slipped each into a clear sleeve. She wrote date, hour, device, and location in block letters along the margin and arranged the sleeves in order. On her laptop, she mirrored the set to a folder tree labeled by day, copied that to an external drive, and tested one file at random. She sealed a manila envelope, wrote Keaton in the corner, and placed it in the cabinet behind vendor contracts. The ledger received a single line: email, receipt, vehicle, photos. She rinsed paper dust from her hands, set the camera battery on charge, and a spare beside it. No flourish. Evidence prefers quiet. At the front counter, she slid a stack of pastry boxes into position and aligned the credit slips. The bell over the door rang with the first customer, and the envelope settled like any other file. It looked harmless, which was precisely the point. By 8:30, the door opened and closed in a regular wave. 2 nurses on day shift split a box of Kuinaman and compared schedules. A retiree asked for the usual and added a weather report with the coins. A delivery driver admired the smell, then took it with him on his shirt. Nora's answers stayed brief, her hands keeping time. Score the loaf, fold the bag, print the ticket, staple the corner. She smoothed a runner wrinkle, refilled the napkin bin, and wrote, "Sold out," beside a pastry she hadn't planned to feature twice. People brought their little news the way they always did. Children learning to drive, a cousin moving, a neighbor planting crepe myrtles along a fence. She listened and returned change. Her gaze went to the window when a dark SUV slowed, then back when it kept going. Ordinary layered itself over what the cabinet held in silence. Marcus texted mid-morning to confirm starting points. He would watch the garage exit from a parked sedan, check highway cameras a mile south, and sit across from the steakhouse where valets ignored still cars if meters stayed fed. He asked for rhythm. Days Greg favored, lunches he skipped, corners he treated as blind. Nora sent the Seguin timestamp, a photo of the steakhouse receipt, and the window between gas and bill. She added a short list of Tuesday habits he had kept for years: tie choices, a fondness for the right-hand pump, a reflex for the same lane at the toll. Marcus replied with a simple rule: patterns get bolder when they think they're invisible. He would keep distance, collect the who and where, and send what mattered. Nora read the thread once, archived it, wiped flour from the edge of her phone case, reset the timer, and rotated a tray. 10 years lived on a small office shelf. Nora took them down and set them on the desk. A clipped article about growth, a certificate from a luncheon, a photo of a ribbon cutting where everyone held the scissors at once. Beside them, she placed the empty Cabernet bottle from the night Greg toasted her first hotel contract. She set last night's steakhouse receipt next to the bottle and turned both labels to face the same way. The objects didn't argue, they formed a line from then to now. In family drama stories, the turn arrives quietly, when 2 dates sit together and refuse to lie. Nora closed the cabinet where Keaton rested and returned a roll of twine to the drawer. She wrote names on tags and tied them to boxes. Through the office window, steam lifted, condensed, disappeared. The day held still briefly to let the next piece approach. The phone buzzed at 2 minutes past noon. Marcus. First visual likely tonight. Patterns repeat when people think no one is looking. Nora wiped a thin crescent of flour from her sleeve with the back of her wrist and pressed her palms to the counter as if testing a tray for turn. She brightened the case lights, reset a timer, and folded 2 pie boxes flat for speed. The hand in the next frame would not belong to a stranger. Evening settled over San Antonio in amber when Marcus texted, "On site." Across town, Nora kept the bakery's closing routine steady. Lights dimmed to a warm line, case glass polished, deposit sealed, timer silenced. She set her phone face down by the ledger, then turned it when the bell above the door rang for nobody. The city held an after-dinner hum that made small facts stand out. Marcus waited in his sedan opposite a windowed steakhouse where valets loped between headlights and lanterns. Couples hesitated long enough to be noticed, then slipped inside. He fed the meter, wiped the camera glass, and sank lower behind the wheel. Through the front panes, white tablecloths cooled to gray, and a corner booth received private light. The door swung, closing the world into frames. Nora read his second text, settled, corner booth, and wiped a crescent of flour from her sleeve. She locked the back door, slid the deadbolt, and listened to the building exhale like steel cooling after heat. Night had begun to talk softly. Marcus's first clear still arrived as Nora turned the case lights one notch brighter for closing. A wrist crossed another wrist, and a slim silver bracelet caught lamplight with the same spark she had seen in a family photo inside the office cabinet. The next image showed a fine-line tattoo near the inner elbow when a sleeve slipped back, a thread she knew from summer gatherings. She opened the cabinet, lifted the photo of Caleb and his wife, Sloane Rivera, and checked the tilt of hair and the bracelet clasp. Back to the phone. Marcus's second angle pinned the tell again. The table added index tabs, Sloane's hard-edged purse on the seat, the valet claim folded under a butter knife. Nora did not speak. She enlarged, compared, and saved, her thumb steady on the glass. The term daughter-in-law never appeared, the frames supplied their own captions. When the third still landed, she stopped magnifying. She simply filed it for later use. Booths talk, if you watch how they breathe. In Marcus's quiet sequence, rims met and separated. Napkins sat not quite parallel. A hand rested against a sleeve, withdrew, then returned as if remembering a cue. Sloane leaned in, elbows near the plate, chin tipped toward Greg's voice. Greg sat with the borrowed ease he wore at charity galas, shoulders squared to a room he wanted. The waitress angled away to shape a bubble of privacy around them and removed the bread plate. A candle burned down 2 marks in 3 frames, which is a way to count time without numbers. Water condensed along the stemware and left moons on linen. Their glasses touched once, lightly, the gesture that says we are careful, not hidden. Marcus logged server rotations, dish times, and card hand back, then reduced it to what mattered: proximity, rhythm, and a public space behaving like a private one. They left through the service door where light-sharpened edges and chairs rested upside down on tables for the night. Greg held the door because Greg holds doors when eyes might be on him. Sloane passed close enough to split his shadow. At the valet kiosk, a plastic stub changed hands. Marcus photographed the counter, the number, and the license plate when the SUV nosed from the alley. He did not chase. He made space, caught the turn signal's patient blinking, and texted Nora the plate, time, and direction. The city thinned into wide lanes. Marcus set distance by a bus length, then by lights alone. He recorded the lane change before the river, the pause at a long yellow, and the exit for downtown hotels. By the time the SUV curved under a portico, his footage was not romance, it was proof. Traffic left pockets large enough to vanish. The hotel waited with revolving doors and carpet meant to hush arrivals. Brass letters floated above a runner that promised discretion. Marcus stood beneath a gift shop eave and worked through reflections. He recorded the pair crossing marble with the choreography of people certain they were between parentheses. Elevators received them without pause. From the square below, a balcony kept view. Curtains parted in a practiced interval, then settled halfway. Through that notch, a shoulder turned, a hand found a waist, a head bowed to speak near a temple. A laugh opened and shut like a door. Faces were unnecessary. Posture wrote the line. A kiss happened at the boundary between light and curtain, not long, not staged, enough to erase doubt for anyone who might need to be convinced. Marcus kept the lens on the architecture and let people drift through it like weather. He noted the balcony's number by counting iron curls, the floor by exit signage, the time by a clock on the square. He moved on when the curtains closed and the room returned to light. Late afternoon, the same pair exited a law office off the plaza. The glass door lettered Wadsworth Lowry, mirrored trees, and a stoplight that rehearsed red, green, yellow for pigeons. Sloane carried a thick envelope with a tie string. Greg held a leather folio under his arm, his tie loosened one polite notch. Marcus took frames from the public sidewalk. Door, plaque, hours posted, tenant directory inside, sun laid across partner names. He kept a distance, shot through reflections, and wrote down the minute. The reception desk sat empty behind glass. A brass bell waited on its pad, as nothing urgent ever happened there. Sloane adjusted the envelope's weight against her hip. Greg used the handrail for the 3 shallow steps, as if he had already carried too much. The pair turned left toward the square. Marcus let them go and photographed the firm name again, then the suite list by the elevator, then the hallway camera's red eye. Nora's reply was not words. She set a tray down without a sound, then ran a blade once around a flan and lifted the ring in a clean motion. She printed the law office frames, trimmed them square, and laid them with the steakhouse and hotel series. On a binder spine, she slid a label she wrote herself: restaurant, hotel, law office, black letters, straight and centered. The cabinet behind vendor contracts received a manila envelope. She marked its corner with the hour. On the laptop, she mirrored files to an external drive and checked one at random. The ledger took a line: restaurant, hotel, law office, times. She replaced the pen on the paper edge and closed the cabinet. Evening touched the plaza again. Marcus sent a last cluster: the valet ticket, a balcony shadow with the hotel sign, the firm door in late light, and 2 frames from a garage where exit cameras see what elevators omit. In one, Sloane reached for Greg's hand and let it fall at the chime. In another, Greg scrolled his phone while walking. He captioned floor numbers and curb corners, filed the set, and sat back to hear traffic taper for proof. The phone buzzed. Marcus had audio from the parking level, engines blur, paperwork clear. He asked to photograph the directory. Nora said yes. In family revenge stories, paperwork is the knife. Marcus sent the audio at 8:17 p.m., a file named with numbers and the word garage. Engines rose and faded under fluorescent hum. Voices slid between. In the bakery office, Nora put on headphones, lowered the volume a notch, and pressed play with a pencil eraser. She let the first pass run without notes, then again with the ledger open to tonight's date. Between idle RPMs, she caught pieces that fit. Sloane pressing for those transfer papers. Greg answering that the notary likes efficiency, the firm across the plaza ready to smooth language. She paused, rewound, and marked the minute. No dramatics, only sequence. Audio has its own custody. Nora copied the file to a fresh USB and then to the external drive, naming each with date, time, and source. She exported a short excerpt that held the transfer lines and printed a transcript with timestamps down the left margin. The sheet curled as it cooled. She flattened it under the empty Cabernet bottle saved from the hotel contract a decade ago, for clarity. The packet slid into a clear sleeve and took a number after restaurant and hotel. The ledger received the same 3 words as the folder: garage audio. Copied. The living room still made room for family. Nora lifted the album where Caleb and Sloane smiled beside Greg and slid a manila envelope beneath it until the spine sat square. She wiped a thin rim of dust from the frame, set the glass to even, and tucked a card so its arrows showed like a small flag. Restaurant, hotel, law office, audio. Daylight caught the edge and made it look like a bookmark. Evidence likes to look accidental. Greg wanted dinner at home, which means he wanted to be seen not wanting anything else. He carried 2 plates, announced a long day, and managed 3 uses of paperwork without a noun. Nora tasted the soup, turned the burner off, and set the spoons parallel to the bowls. He laughed at his own story, more eyes than humor. A folio appeared near her chair in the good light. He let it sit while they ate as if it were an afterthought. When plates were stacked and the dishwasher latched, he unzipped the folio and eased a neat stack onto the wood, tabs flagged in cheerful colors. "Just scan for numbers. It's dense," he said, hand drifting toward hers, then away. Nora wiped the table in 2 strokes, sat beneath the pendant, and put on reading glasses. She turned pages at the tempo her hands trusted. Keaton Holdings, LLC sat in bold near the top of page 1. A page later, an assignment clause pivoted on the word authorization, and another page moved rights for efficiency into a signature box that did not require her name to be present when applied. She paused, returned to the first page, photographed the caption and the signature lines, and slid a sticky note onto a paragraph that mentioned continuity of operations. The camera saw what it needed: headings, blanks, flags, the way a box waited for ink that would not be hers. She closed the folio, chose a pen with a bright cap, and set it next to the stack without uncapping it. "I'll read it fresh tomorrow," she said to the room. Under her breath, not for him, she arranged 2 words in the air: "do not," and placed the cap pointing toward the kitchen clock. In the office, she texted Marcus: "Priority, identify notary, verify weekend access, confirm suite list." Then she powered the phone off and let the bakery settle around silence. Before bed, she made a list of what exists and what might be moved without her. Lease, supplier contracts, hotel agreements, POS accounts, payroll, vehicles, insurance, the savings for the next oven. On letterhead, she drafted a short instruction to counsel. Hold everything. Honor no third-party authority without her direct confirmation. She printed one copy and slipped it into her purse under the ledger. She left the email unsent and the draft open. Some warnings travel better on paper. Morning sharpened edges. Nora moved through coffee and inventory before Greg's shoes reached the hall. He arrived with a voicemail to explain and a tie chosen to impress. She poured his cup and said she'd be out for a meeting in Nashville to confirm a new partner. She might be late. He stopped mid-stir. Relief gives itself away in shoulders and keys. Big meeting? He asked, letting steam fog his glasses. It helps the chain, she answered, and turned to the list for deliveries. He repeated good luck twice to sound casual and left on lighter feet. Text blocks from Marcus stacked themselves neat as receipts. Confirmed, a notary known to the firm. A weekend shortcut rumored. The vehicle still using the downtown garage. A document review on Friday afternoon. Ruth replied to Nora's invitation with a time and a teacup emoji. Nora printed the quarter's PL, a list of equipment with serial numbers, and the hotel account's payable contacts who answer on the first ring. She placed the stack with her counsel letter, then added a sheet labeled Asset Index and Dates. Sequence looked like protection. At the shop, she set drawers in order, wrote small labels where only staff would read them, and told her assistant to keep duplicate invoices ready and to note any stranger asking about deliveries. She rotated the rear camera one notch to widen the frame and checked storage for a week of continuous days. Greg texted a thumbs up about his imaginary lunch, then asked if she could sign the simple page before she left town so they would look organized. She set the phone face down on the stainless and kept the bench moving. Flour, butter, scale, tray. Organization lives in actions, not signatures. Ruth arrived with a cardigan over her arm and a small notebook, as if for a class. Nora poured tea and opened the blinds one slat wider. Ruth sat where she could see the Keaton front door. They spoke about church flowers, a neighbor's dog, the new teacher on the next block. Nora did not mention Nashville. She did not need to. She asked if Ruth might stop by tomorrow late morning in case the air turned and the cardigan proved useful. Ruth wrote down the time and smiled in the way neighbors used to say yes without ceremony. By late afternoon, Marcus reported a short meeting at Wadsworth Lowry with the notary rumored to appear on Saturday, for convenience. He sent a photo of the lobby clock, the empty reception chair, and a partner list. He filmed a corridor through glass and texted the minute. He did not narrate. The frames came with their own verbs: enter, wait, exit, glance. He warned that people who rush signatures prefer weekends and familiar rooms. They like kitchens, he wrote. Nora read the line twice, then looked at her own table as if it were being considered by someone else's pen. She inventoried again before locking the office. Bank accounts, contracts, lease, vehicles, insurance, equipment, receivables, vendor terms. She made a final copy of the counsel letter and placed it in her purse beneath the ledger, where her hand would find it without looking. She checked the window latch, the back lock, and the cabinet where Keaton, Evidence, Series A, slept under the album's weight. She turned the bakery lights off in sequence, hood to case, front to back, so the room fell dark the way it wakes, order first, then quiet. Dusk carried Marcus's last text. They're meeting the notary Saturday. Might try it at home. A photo showed a business card corner sliding from a folio and the hallway mirrored in the firm door. Nora replied with a single word, noted, and set an early alarm. The plan could walk itself now. Tomorrow she would be traveling, and the house would be polite enough to welcome whoever believed it belonged to them. Midnight clicked the door into its frame. On the counter, a list waited for morning. Day trip scheduled. Back late. Beneath it, smaller, evidence in order. Below that, underlined once, do not sign. Dawn edged the Keaton house when Nora boiled water and left a note on the counter. Day trip, back late. The letters were square, the dash centered, the paper aligned with the kitchen clock's rim. She set a pen beside it so the clip pointed to the hour, then moved through the room in the order she always kept, pillows eased into corners, blanket combed straight, blind cord at the notch that lets light in without offering the street a stage. She checked the lock, lifted the mail slot, and let it fall. Counsel's instruction wrote in her purse between ledger and permits, a single page telling any gatekeeper to hold off on third-party authority until she called from her own number. Vendor contacts were printed, clipped by date. The asset list wore a sticky note over the digits. She checked the manila envelope under the family album, Keaton, Evidence, Series A, then closed the cabinet as softly as a book. Before leaving her bedroom, she set a small recorder on the dresser and confirmed what counsel had said. Preserve conversations in her own home, keep times, keep context. Ruth answered Nora's knock with slippers and a folded cardigan. Nora chose the chair with sightlines to the Keaton front walk and set the thermos on a coaster. Ruth cracked the curtain one finger wide. The block held its breath between school buses and leaf blowers. Blue newspaper sleeves glowed on 2 steps. "We'll just sit," Ruth said, placing a saucer on the sill to make the edge look useful. Across the street, Greg moved like a man staging a room without wanting the credit. He straightened magazines, dusted with a cloth that missed the dust, and opened a bottle to let it breathe, as if a bottle's breath could stand in for his. His text pinged Nora's phone. "Travel safe." Then a second. "Before dinner, could you sign the simple page?" "No rush." She set the phone face down. On the porch, keys turned faster than habit. Inside, a lamp clicked on, although daylight still owned the room. A taxi eased to the curb near late morning. Sloane stepped out in a magnolia print dress, sunglasses reflecting the block back at itself. Her purse stayed tucked close. She checked both ways, the way people check for witnesses, and pressed the call button. Greg opened before the chime finished. His eyes ran the street with choreographed care. He let her in as if he were holding weather back. Sound carried in quiet patterns. From the dresser recorder, steady as a clock, came the small manners of a house pretending to be a restaurant after hours. A cork shifting, a cabinet agreeing, a single glass set down. Voices bent near each other, low enough to keep the ceiling from participating. "Home is easier than a hotel," a man said. "You promised the paperwork," came back in soft syllables. The machine didn't judge. It kept what it was given and asked for time. Ruth poured 2 cups. Nora held the heat with both hands and watched her own mailbox to keep the picture honest. Across the way, a shadow crossed the hallway and returned. Heels placed 2 neat dots in a line and stopped. The kitchen window fogged and cleared twice. On the island, a plate and a wedge of cheese appeared, arranged to look casual. At the far edge, a folder sat with one corner lifted, like a book waiting for its reader. Greg narrates when he wants a story to behave. He said the notary was flexible, that the language had been smoothed, that her name would stay where it belonged. He said Saturday, the way people say deadline. Sloane asked about timing and space, preferably when the house was quiet. "Saturday," he repeated, letting the syllables lie flat on the counter. The recorder logged the time. A quick note from Crimson Heirs. If twists like this keep you hooked on family revenge stories and family drama stories, tap like, subscribe, and drop your city in the comments so we can see how far it travels. Minutes lengthened, because nothing asked them to hurry. The recorder caught the edit of a schedule. Dinner moved for optics, a call postponed to look natural. "You'll phone me when she's gone," Sloane said. "I already did," Greg answered, proud of the small trick he thought large. They spoke about a firm with a partner list that looks respectable at a glance, and about routing that keeps signatures from touching the same desk at once. Nora wrote 2 words in Ruth's spiral: Saturday, notary, and nothing else. The block warmed toward afternoon. A delivery truck stopped at the corner. A neighbor walked a dog the color of toast and didn't linger. Ruth tipped the curtain another half knot and wrote flour on her grocery list, though she had plenty. Nora loosened the thermos cap a fraction and left it to print a ring on the coaster, a small clock of its own. Inside, a drawer announced itself. People raised their volume when Wood speaks. A laugh started and ended quickly. Glass tapped the counter. The folder's lifted corner settled as if instructed. Marcus texted that he was across the way in a parked sedan and would remain until the block exhaled. Nora replied with a single period and let the phone face down again. The house kept its practiced breathing. The living room lamp went off, then on again, as if someone believed light could dress a decision. The hallway shadow shortened and stretched with the hour. When the taxi returned for Sloane, it stopped one house down to keep the Keaton curb clear. Greg walked her to the door with a hand at the small of her back that could claim chivalry if the steakhouse, the balcony, and the law office had never happened. She adjusted her glasses so the block could see itself in miniature. The magnolia still climbed the fabric. She left with the purse tucked. Greg stood in the doorway for a breath that wasn't long and closed the door politely. After quiet returned, Nora and Ruth let the kettle burn a minute, then poured again. In the kitchen across the street, a light clicked on and held. People who want to look at papers pretend more light helps thinking. A chair moved an inch and stopped. Ruth wrote the time and drew a small square around it, then added front lamp steady. Nora rested the pencil on the page until graphite made a dot you could find later with a fingertip. Quiet chooses its own interruption. A chirp cut the afternoon and paused. Another chirp followed, nearer to the Keaton house, as if a small alarm believed it was defending a larger room. Nora did not stand. She flipped the notebook to a clean page and wrote the minute, then printed 2 words. Interior alarm. Ruth rose, set her cup in the sink, and wiped the rim with her thumb before anyone could assign meaning to it. The sound repeated, orderly as a timer, then waited. She touched her purse to feel the folded letter still present and left her hand resting there. Marcus texted, "Keep position." Nora placed the phone face down without typing back. The next part belonged to people who carry radios and wear boots that sound like decisions. The house across the street had selected its witnesses. The door it wanted next would arrive from the station, not the office. When the first siren threaded the block, Ruth lowered the curtain to its ordinary angle. Nora stood only to set the thermos in the basket, then sat again and watched the sidewalk become purposeful. Somewhere behind glass, the alarm kept its little duty. She thought about flour measured to the gram and ledgers balanced to the penny. She had changed nothing and put everything in line. The rest would arrive with uniforms and questions. By the time the truck took the corner, the block had begun to learn. Neighbors turned their heads, engines idled with protocol's patience. Nora kept her seat and breathed as evenly as ovens require when asked to be steady. She pictured the map of her steps as small arrows. Sit, note, wait. Caleb's voice would be the signal she answered. Everything else was noise she could let pass. Boots met the Keaton porch boards. A fist knocked in a rhythm meant to be heard over what the house was trying to say. The bell on Ruth's door did not ring. Nora watched the angle of the Keaton door and saw it as a line the story would cross. Somewhere inside, a lamp still burned, a folder's corner lifted, and a recorder did its job. The first answer would come from within, and the block would hear the second. She rested her hands on the basket's handle and let the moment hold. Part 4 had ended with a plan that could walk. Part 5 delivered it to the threshold. The next step wore boots. Siren threaded the street like a red line through cloth. The engine settled at the Keaton curb and let its weight speak. Caleb stepped off first, signed 2 short gestures, and his crew moved with the calm of practice. Boots found the porch boards without hurry. Caleb's jaw set, then eased, a reflex learned at real fires and family kitchens alike. Neighbors learned the rhythm in a beat. Doors opened. Elbows found railings. Voices lowered as the block agreed to whisper. Ruth adjusted her curtain 1 notch, not enough to change the room, enough to clear the view. Nora sat straight with both hands on the basket handle and the notebook open. Marcus stayed in the sedan 2 houses down, camera set on the dash. He lowered the window a finger's width, then raised it to tame glare. The street gathered itself and waited for the uniforms to assign meaning. Inside, smoke lived along the ceiling like a thought too thin to keep. The detector chirped, paused, chirped again. 2 firefighters entered on Caleb's nod, masks ready but unnecessary. One went to the kitchen to find source and switch. The other opened windows for air, A gloved thumb silenced the alarm. A knob returned home. Air moved. The pale haze became ordinary light and left the faint smell of something that wanted to be trouble and failed. Protocol keeps houses honest. Caleb sent one team to confirm the basement clear and another to sweep the hall for heat. He chalked the front door with a stop so lines wouldn't scuff paint, even though the lines stayed on the truck. The clipboard man logged times. Caleb touched the radio and gave 4 numbers that framed the response. Through the open doorway, the block saw steady work, not drama. Panic drained from the siren and went back into the horn. Then the hallway. 2 firefighters worked as a pair and stopped at a bedroom threshold. A palm went up. Hold. Caleb crossed to them without changing the air around his shoulders. He looked once, reached back for a sheet from an EMT, and another for the doorway. The team drew fabric forward and built a narrow privacy wall. Voices stayed neutral and low, field words stripped to function. Too conscious. Non-life-threatening. Request EMT. Limit entry. The hallway obeyed. Outside, the street reset its angle. Marcus did what public ground allows, photographed the exterior clock, the station numbers on the truck, the house front with the door propped, the kitchen window open. He did not point glass at bedroom glass. Ruth recorded the minute the stretcher wheels passed the hydrangea and noted the kitchen switch position in her compact script. Nora wrote 3 short lines: engine arrived, alarm silenced, ventilation begun, then added EMT and hallway under the previous time. EMTs took the corridor in a straight run and divided roles without speech. One went to the nightstand for vitals. One unfolded a sheet the color of forgiveness and made a wider wall. A third coordinated the carry. They moved with the careful speed of people who protect patience and dignity at once. Across the street, a neighbor turned her face and pretended to tie a shoe. The stretcher rolled, quiet hardware, quick hands. Caleb stepped to the porch as the first stretcher left. He asked a bystander to give the squad a path and use the kind of thanks that ends talk. The sheet covered what needed covering. Even so, the block absorbed enough to make a shape, and shapes travel. The second stretcher followed with the same coordination and the same sheet tidied at the same edge. 2 EMTs went straight to the ambulance, doors ready, monitors settled, belts fixed. Documentation arrives as surely as hoses. The crew made a fast circle through the kitchen again. They logged the stove off, the pot cooled, the window open. They noted that the detector operated and no active hazard remained. The clipboard clicked. Names were not gathered at the door. The report would be completed at the truck. Caleb tested the front mat with one shoe for heat that wasn't there, then spoke to neighbors in a voice that borrowed patience from long practice. Questions softened. The block believed them. From Ruth's chair, Nora watched the street unwind in segments. Marcus texted one word, hospital, and slid the sedan 2 spaces into a legal slot. Nora wrote ambulance departure with a circle around the time and pressed the circle with a fingertip. She closed the notebook, stood, smoothed the skirt she saved for Sunday mornings, then sat again. The purse stayed ready. She crossed when the path cleared. Caleb was halfway down the steps, helmet tucked against his side. He didn't look at her first. He looked at his crew. When their motions told him they were fine, he turned. Lines at his eyes held steady. He nodded the way he does for citizens, and then with a smaller nod for his mother. Nora didn't step into the bubble command draws. She stopped short and let his work define distance. Report reads kitchen alarm, no fire, he said. Scene stabilized, 2 transported. He met her eyes. Silence completed the report. Thank you, she said. 2 words were all he needed. I'm going to County General. He answered with a short yes that carried approval and protocol. Family resumes after forms. Back in Ruth's kitchen, Nora checked what matters before keys. The album still weighted the envelope in the cabinet. The seal held. She traced one edge with a finger and found no lift. She set her keys at right angles on a note that said, Council Packet, Asset Index, ID, Phone. She called her attorney and left a message. She would be at County General. Any contact from Wadsworth Lowry should be rerouted to counsel only. Then she texted Marcus, one word, hospital, and received the same in return. Neighbors reclaimed doorways in orderly retreat. Someone rolled a forgotten bin back to its place. The air smelled like linen more than smoke. Caleb signed the last line on the clipboard and turned the truck toward base. He raised a hand to the block, not a wave, an acknowledgement. The siren stayed quiet, leaving. It was not that kind of exit. Nora and Ruth walked to the sidewalk together. "Do you want company?" Ruth asked. Nora shook her head and rested her palm on Ruth's forearm for a second, gratitude exchanged without weight. Ruth returned to her sink and wrote a final time in the notebook, then closed it the way people close a prayer book, careful with the hinge. In the car, Nora set the purse on the passenger seat and fastened the belt over it so the packet wouldn't slide. She checked the hospital address she already knew, then closed her eyes for a breath to find center. She opened them and drove as she always drives. Within signs, no sudden moves, letting others make their own haste. At a red light, she touched 2 lines on her list: evidence, counsel, and felt steadiness return. County General absorbed noise and returned quiet. Nora parked where visitors park and smoothed paper edges inside the purse so they wouldn't catch. Automatic doors breathed open. Fluorescent light replaced afternoon. People went about being brave in small rooms. A volunteer at the desk asked for her name. She gave it. "Who are you visiting?" "Evaluation for 2, she said, then both last names. The volunteer pointed to molded chairs and a hallway where an elevator opened and closed like a practiced sentence. Marcus texted a photo from near the vending machines where reflective glass turned passers-by into shapes. Nora replied with a single letter. She sat, aligned her knees to the chair's front edge, and set the purse on her lap with both hands over it. The room held voices, television murmur, elevator chimes, and the slow gnash of a printer. She let sounds pass and counted them until they faded into one. The last thing she wrote before a nurse opened a door was 3 words in a margin: dignity, documents, decision. Part 6 ends where the engine's noise becomes paperwork's quiet. The next door will not open with a key. It will open with a pen, and the signatures will not be placed in a kitchen. Paper would speak next, quietly. Fluorescent air folded around County General and then slipped back, regular as breath. Automatic doors opened and closed in patient syllables. Nora sat upright with her knees squared to the chair's front edge, purse on her lap, both hands holding the handles as if they were part of her posture. The volunteer at the desk asked for the name she was visiting, typed, and slid a visitor badge across the counter. Nora aligned the badge edge with the seam of her purse and breathed in a measured 4, out a measured 4, the way she steadies caramel on a busy morning. Marcus waited by the vending machines, where reflective glass turned him into a ghost of posture and shoes. He didn't wave. He tipped his chin once to mark presence and went back to his phone. Part 6 had ended with engines quieting into paperwork's quiet. A nurse with a clipboard called her name. The badge beeped at a waist-high post, and a door released. Monitors clicked in soft grids. The nurse kept pace just ahead, softened her voice, and set rules. 2 at a time. Curtain stays unless staff opens it. Questions through me first. "We'll keep unnecessary eyes out," she said, shifting her pen in the metal clip so it wouldn't snag. Nora matched the stride and stopped where she was told to stop. On the other side, a monitor traced a steady line. The nurse adjusted the dimmer and placed a spare blanket on a chair. "Side table is yours," she added. "Ring if water or anything else is needed." An EMT signed the handoff at the foot of the bed and summarized without drama. "Vitals stable. Pain controlled. Observation." He slid the pen back into the clipboard, clicked it once, and stepped out. The nurse tugged the curtain an inch, checked wristbands, and glanced at Nora for agreement. Nora nodded once, the kind of nod that closes a ledger line. The room held. In the elevator, Nora had already spoken to counsel and said only what matters in the order it matters. Now she brought the email up for the second time. Counsel had sent a preliminary freeze instruction and attached templates for a cease and desist, a revocation of any supposed agency, and a draft divorce petition designed to keep assets where work had put them. Nora wrote the hour in her pocket notebook. She unzipped the purse and drew out the manila envelope she had lived with these past days. Keaton, Evidence, Series A. She set it on the side table so the label faced the bed, squared its corners, and opened it. Inside, sleeves appeared in the order she had sworn to keep. Restaurant, hotel, law office, audio. The first sleeve bore the steakhouse, a table corner, a wine label, a valet slip, server initials, and card handbag. The second held the balcony and the curtained light where posture wrote lines better than mouths do. The third showed a glass door lettered Wadsworth Lowry and a tenant list. The fourth was a transcript excerpt with timestamps. "This is straightforward," Nora said, voice mild, gaze on captions, not on faces. "You sign the divorce. You relinquish any claim or control over Sunrise Patisserie and Keaton Holdings. You surrender keys and cards. You do not access accounts. You do not contact Caleb. Counsel receives copies today. If you need a pen, I brought one." She rotated the pen until it lay exactly parallel to the folder's edge. The door opened enough to admit a helmet tucked under an arm. Caleb stepped in, uniform clean. He acknowledged the nurse first, then his mother with a small focal nod that meant "I see you and I see the job." "Checking on transport status," he said, exactly what a man in his shirt should say. He stayed near the door and let the nurse keep her angles. He exhaled once and stepped back into the hall. Nora began the walkthrough the way she shows a new hire how invoices line up with trays. "San Antonio, same night as Dallas," she said, sliding the first sleeve halfway out. "2 entrees, the Cabernet, same label as the bottle from our 10th. Server initials, timestamp, then the plate leaving the alley and reappearing under the hotel's portico." She slid the hotel sequence enough to show iron curls of a balcony and the notch of curtain light. "Public street, public view, no faces required." The law office came next. Door, plaque, hours posted, and the shot through reflections where a string-tied envelope rode a hip. Finally, the audio transcript with timestamps and the words that mattered. Transfer, notary, efficient. "Sequence, not accusation," she said. "Evidence likes order." Greg looked toward the ceiling corner as if a witness might grow there and revise the record. Sloane drew the blanket up one notch, let it fall, then pulled it again. The nurse smoothed the top sheet so the movement had somewhere to land and stepped back. "Keep it calm," she said. "Announcement, not plea." The conference call with counsel began with a chime too bright for the room. "We're on," counsel said. "I've reviewed what you forwarded. I'm transmitting a cease and desist to the firm regarding any steps toward transfer, and a notice to the notary that any signatures purporting to be yours are revoked and unauthorized. I will follow with an asset freeze to your bank contacts." Marcus texted photos of the lobby sign and suite list so counsel could anchor names to places. Nora drew a checkmark by notary neutralized in her notebook. Counsel's next email arrived with attachments that parted the room. A divorce petition draft, a temporary restraining order aimed at assets and accounts, and a revocation of agency naming names. The hospital's administrative office would print at cost for visitors. Nora asked the nurse if she could step out to collect documents for her patient's review. The nurse nodded, pushed the curtain back to give space, and said she would remain with the patients. Nora and Marcus moved to the office, paid, waited, and returned with warm paper. The nurse positioned a rolling table, placed a pen on it, and set the documents in a single centered stack. Greg began the familiar melody of bargain. He spoke softly for the sound of reason, misunderstandings at law firms, crossed signals among partners, the fatigue of a man distracted by family strain. He said it wasn't what it looked like. He asked to take the papers home, to read in his chair, to have a night to consider. Nora drew the packets a fraction toward her and tapped the signature block with a nail-trimmed square. "Here," she said. "Here, and here." She did not raise her voice. She shortened the distance between facts. Sloane aimed words toward the doorway where Caleb had been. "Caleb," she called, small and even. "Please don't let this become a spectacle. We can discuss this without forms." The nurse shook her head almost invisibly. Caleb's voice answered from the hall where he had stayed on purpose. "I'm on duty," he said. "Talk to the nurse for room questions." His boots did not move. The boundary remained where training and the day had drawn it. The hospital provided what the hospital could: a staff witness to observe signatures if signatures were made, a stamp to record time and location, envelopes to separate originals from copies. Nora removed the cap from her pen and set it beside the TRO packet, then placed the pen between the two lines that waited for ink. She did not hand it to anyone. She made it available. The nurse took a position that protected hands. Marcus stayed in the public corridor and captured only what public ground allows: doorway, clock, the top edge of a clipboard. Paperwork doesn't require speeches. It requires hands, then ink, then a stamp. The first stroke wrote a line where a life had been. The second wrote a line where a plan had been. The witness pressed a red "received" into the corner and initialed the margin. The nurse recorded the act in the chart as a note about documents presented and signed, nothing more. Nora slipped copies into a blue folder and checked her email. Counsel had already replied. Copies received, filings queued, confirmations to follow at first light. Greg exhaled with the sound a man makes when air meets a truth he cannot edit. He reached for the folio he no longer owned and found plain tabletop. Nora placed her hand over the blue folder. "Keys," she said without sharpness. He hesitated long enough for the nurse to glance at the clock. He pulled a ring from a pocket and set it down. It clinked the way small metals clink when they admit function. Nora counted them the way she counts racks: front door, back door, truck, office, safe, and slid them into a small zip bag. "Cards," she added. The wallet produced 2. They followed the keys. She sealed the bag and placed it in her purse. Sloane asked for her phone as if that object might reverse film. "Later," the nurse said. "Rest." In the hallway, footsteps traded shifts. The building went on with its regular sounds. Nora folded the manila envelope and slid it beneath the blue folder. The table looked like a side table again. Counsel returned to the line through the speaker set to low. "We'll file first thing," she said. "Expect confirmation numbers in the morning. If the firm attempts contact, forward to me and do not engage." Nora said thank you, and then nothing, which was the exact vocabulary the room could hold. She stood, adjusted the chair, and lifted her purse. "Rest," she said to the bed. Same word, 2 meanings. To the nurse. "Thank you for the room's order." In the hall, Caleb waited with his helmet under his arm, exactly where procedure had left him. He met his mother's eyes and found in them the same inventory the bakery demands: flour, yeast, water, salt, date, time, proof, bake. "We're heading back," he said. Nora touched his sleeve with 2 fingers, a touch from before words, and nodded. The dome light on the ambulance flashed once as if to underline the line between work and family. At the visitor desk, Marcus handed Nora a printed receipt from the administrative office and a sealed envelope addressed to counsel's runner. He did not summarize or congratulate. "Anything else to fetch?" he asked. When she said no, he peeled away toward the elevator and his sedan. Nora paused at the exit for the automatic glass, then stepped into late day. As she crossed the lot, her phone buzzed with confirmations. Bank locks in place, vendor accounts listing her as sole contact, the lease manager acknowledging written notice that no substitution of operator would be accepted. Another message reported that card readers had synced to new credentials. The world arranged itself to match the paperwork and the work before that. It was, at last, back to the correct names. On her screen, subject lines stacked in progression: bank confirmation, vendor acknowledgement, lease note received, council calendar invite for filings at 8:30 a.m. Each line felt like a switch thrown in the right room. She flagged the messages, saved the attachments to her evidence folder, and mirrored them to the drive in her purse. No trumpet, no verdict, just systems correcting their labels so the work and the names matched. The night would be short because morning wanted ovens. Nora set the purse on the passenger seat and snapped the belt across it. She watched her hands on the wheel for the length of a breath and then drove without dramatics through a street that had seen drama enough. At a red light, she waded through the full cycle, honoring each clause, red, green, yellow, like a contract that kept faith. In her head, tomorrow's hook wrote itself, gentle as steam on glass. Doors open early, and some keys will not. Morning came soft and clean. Nora unlocked Sunrise Patisserie before the street stretched, tested the ovens, and slid 2 trays of flan into heat. Steam purled on the front glass. She wiped it with her wrist and wrote "open" in steady strokes. Caleb arrived with a toolbox and a grocery bag, set both on the counter, and checked the humming case like a mechanic listening to a familiar engine. He carried boxes to the back room and left his spare boots by the mop sink as if they had always belonged there. Customers arrived earlier than usual. Nora greeted each with the same lean smile and wrapped pastries tight so sugar stayed where warmth wanted it. She returned between bells to smooth caramel, lifted the flan free, and let the wobble settle. In the evening, she toured the neighborhood with Ruth, talking of garden soil and choir schedules. Sunday, she sat 3 pews from the back and let the light fall across the hymn board like a clean ledger. "This is Crimson Heirs," her outro would say later. If you follow family revenge stories and family drama stories, subscribe, tell us your city, and meet us for the next one.